Welcome, sports fans, to All Exclusive Sports 1534. I'm your host, Mason Biddix. Thank you guys for joining us in our inaugural podcast for AES 1534. Before we get started, I'd like to thank all those who made this possible, my CMO, Storm Pruitt, and my COO working behind the scenes, Landon Biddix, as well as my family and the Lord himself, Jesus Christ. Thank you guys so much. I also, before we get started, want to ask you guys to please go subscribe to our YouTube page. It is free. All you need is a Gmail account for that. And also check out our website, www.allexclusivesports1534.com. On our website, you'll be able to find the links to these podcasts through iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, Buzzsprout, and Podomatic. That would be much appreciated for you guys to have different ways to listen to these podcasts. Also, I want to let you guys know that we have also opened up a donations page on our website. 25% of each donation will go to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Make-A-Wish is a great thing that sports uses to help these kids in need of wanting to be able to meet their famous athlete of choice. So let's dive into it. Saturday we had the Heisman Trophy presentation, and that obviously went to Kyler Murray, who was a dual sport athlete at Oklahoma, something that we don't really see much often at the Division I level, and especially to be able to do it so successfully. Before we dive into him in particular, I just want to take a look back at the finalists themselves. You had Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State, Kyler Murray, of course, from Oklahoma, and Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama. The race was unbelievable. Tua Tagovailoa had the most second-place votes in the history of the Heisman finalists. So with that being said, any other year, he's winning the Heisman Trophy. And that's what's crazy. He had over 1,800 votes, and that is just unbelievable for a second-place finisher. And you know what makes that so interesting is the fact that he didn't play in over 75% of his fourth quarter games. So this kid only played 3 quarters most of the season, which is unbelievable considering Alabama had the most 50-plus points games in NCAA Division I history. Then you look at Dwayne Haskins, who won a Big Ten championship with Ohio State this year, and you go back and look at the stats. Dwayne Haskins and Kyler Murray led 5 of the major categories apiece, and the only thing that Tua led was the interceptions. He only allowed 4 interceptions compared to Dwayne's 8 and Kyler's 7. But then you go back and look at the other. Dwayne Haskins had 496 pass attempts. He had 348 completions and over 4,500 passing yards. Kyler Murray was second to him with 4,000 and Tua with only 3,353. Passing yards per game went to Dwayne Haskins at 352.3. and which is not even close to the second and third place finishers there. Total touchdowns, Dwayne and Kyler tied at 51 and Tua only at 40. The passer rating, though, Kyler Murray took that by a long shot at 205.72. So you look at that part of it, and Kyler Murray is your favorite, and I think that one of the main reasons why he got it over Tua is the fact of, yes, he completed all of quarters during the season. He won his conference championship, and, you got to credit Tua. He had a great season as a sophomore, but at the same time, Tua not being able to play in all 4 quarters of every single game, regardless of his stats, and also in that SEC championship game against Georgia, he just didn't have it. He couldn't find it. He started out 3 of 9 for passing and just could not find it at all. I will say this, though, for Tua. Throughout the year, it took him after 26 touchdowns to throw his first interception. That's unbelievable, but I'm telling you guys, next year, you're looking at your Heisman winner in Tua Tagovailoa. Dwayne Haskins will probably be back in New York as well. Kyler Murray, let's dive into him. The winner of the Heisman Trophy on Saturday, a 21-year-old junior from Texas. He was a top prospect for the MLB draft coming out of high school, but he decided to follow in his father's footsteps to go to Texas A&M and be the quarterback. He ended up transferring to be the backup at Oklahoma behind Baker Mayfield, but due to the transfer rules, he had to sit out a year for his eligibility. Backed up last year, paid his dues, and this year he was the Heisman winner and looking to compete for a national championship. Just a little background on Kyler. He was the first high school player to ever be selected to the Under Armour All-American game in baseball and football in high school. What an unbelievable accomplishment for Kyler. He was a perfect 42-0 as a quarterback and won 3 state championships in the state of Texas. And I don't know if you guys really know how big Texas football is, but it is unbelievably huge down there, and I swear they could beat some colleges at the high school level down there. He was drafted this past year by the Oakland A's as the 9th overall pick, and he did sign the $4.6 million signing bonus, and he's expected to report to spring training come March, according to his agent Scott Boras. His 2008 accolades on the college gridiron this year, he was the AP Player of the Year, won the Davey O'Brien Award, first team All Big 12, and Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. Unbelievable stats for this guy. He's only 5'11", 190 pounds. He's not your prototypical quarterback size per se. He's more like a Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield type player. So he did fill the shoes of Baker leaving. He was Oklahoma's 7th winner of the Heisman Trophy, which ties Ohio State most all time, and is the first time that a school has had back-to-back players win the Heisman at the same position, of course with Baker Mayfield being the quarterback last year. Great season for Kyler Murray, as he will be competing against Tua Tagovailoa in the semifinals come December 29th, so we will see who gets the upper hand there if Tua keeps that ankle healthy. We saw him with a boot on in New York the majority of the time, just trying to stay healthy, rehabbing that as he's out there. So as we move on to our next topic, the college football playoff controversy. This is something that I don't even think the experts can get right, because it's so hard to deal with. We had the 2 teams at first, where the number 1 team and the number 2 team played for the BCS National Championship, and I don't think that we'll ever see enough teams be in, because it always seems as if someone's going to be left out. This year we have at number 1 Alabama, well-deserving at 13-0. Number 2 Clemson, also at 13-0. Notre Dame at 3 at 12-0. Keep in mind they did not have to play a conference championship game. Oklahoma comes in at 4 at 12-1. They lost to Texas early in the year only by a field goal, and they revenged that loss in the Big 12 championship game last weekend. Coming in at 5, the first 2 out, coming in at 5 is Georgia, 11-2, and Ohio State at 12-1 at number 6. And some teams wonder, well, where's UCF? Where are these other teams? UCF's undefeated as well. Well, have they played the competition that all these other teams have had? And that's my thing with Clemson and Notre Dame. Clemson is a well-known, prestigious college football program, but you look at their conference championship, they played Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh lost to the University of North Carolina, who won 2 games all year long and finished at the bottom of their division in the ACC. It's just not there. They had a close game with Syracuse, so I'm not really sure. Honestly, I would rather have Oklahoma up at 2 and Clemson down at 4 potentially, just because of the amount of competition that has been played. And then you look at Notre Dame at 3. My thing with Notre Dame, they're an independent. They beat Michigan, but Michigan got pounced by Ohio State in the final game of Ohio State's season. And Ohio State lost to Purdue. We all know that thrashing that happened earlier in the season as well. So I'm not really sure what goes into the committee's heads as far as the rankings go, but that's why they're doing it instead of me and you guys. So my only discussion for that is, why 4 teams? Why did they choose 4 teams? I'm not really sure. I know that they want the best 4 teams in. I'm not exactly sure why they wouldn't just expand it to even 5, give number 1 a bye. That way you have the Power 5 conference winners. In my opinion, I think there should be 8 teams. 8 teams, you have the Power 5 winners, considering they play their championship game. Power 5 winners, as well as 3 at-larges. 3 at-larges meaning a second SEC team, a second ACC team, considerably the Notre Dame, who plays an independent schedule, doesn't have a conference. Then you would have the UCF, etc. They would be able to be in if the 8-team playoff, and the first games would be played at the higher seed site, and then you would have your 4. That way the UCF, who claims to be the national champions, can be in there with the big boys and actually play somebody and see if they are able to move on, not even move on, see if they can even compete in the first half with an Alabama, an Oklahoma, or a Georgia. I just don't think personally that it'll happen. But that's my argument for the 8-team case. I do think that should be something that should be considered, but I did read up that they're not considering expanding it anytime soon. So we'll see about that. But Georgia, I made a case for this, and I do believe that Georgia would beat Oklahoma, Clemson, and Notre Dame, and they're left out at 5. Ultimately, if you're trying to get the 4 best teams in, which is what this committee tries to do week in and week out, Notre Dame should not be in the top 4. It should arguably be Georgia. Georgia's the only team that held a lead over Alabama for more than 2 minutes all season. Unbelievable, and that's something that even though Georgia does have 2 losses, and they do have a loss to an LSU team that throttled that, it would change the whole spectrum for this playoff if they put Georgia in with 2 losses. It's something that hasn't been done since they started this 14 playoff. There's never been a team with 2 losses in the CFP. And with that being said, I believe that it doesn't matter the losses as long as you have the 4 best teams in. Now, I can understand why Ohio State didn't get in. They got throttled by Purdue. That speaks for itself. So Ohio State definitely, I don't believe, is one of the 4 best teams. Did they show signs of being one of the best teams? Absolutely. But after that Purdue loss, they just did not. I mean, yeah, they showed up, but just the fact that they had that on their resume isn't comparable to any other of these 4 teams. So you got Alabama and Oklahoma playing in the first round in the Orange Bowl in Miami. Then you've got Clemson and Notre Dame playing as well on the 29th in Dallas. So we'll see how that works out. Regardless, these teams are deserving, I would say, in an 8-team playoff. But with the 4 teams, I still think Georgia should be in. They gave Alabama the biggest scare, you could say, all year long. With that being said, we're going to move on to the next topic, the third and final topic of this discussion. Coaching changes. Coaching changes. We've got retirements and coaches moving around. Like always, the coaching carousel is always a factor come bowl season, especially moving into the off season. And the first one on the list is Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer has a 186-32 overall record. He's 11-3 in bowl games and 2-1 in the college football playoff. He spent 1 season at Bowling Green, another at Utah, 5 at Florida, where he won 2 national titles. He took a 2-year break because of a cyst that he had on his brain, and that's why he was at Florida. And he, found all these complications. He was having trouble on the sidelines, being able to handle the pressure. And as a college football coach, especially a head coach, having a brain cyst is not something that you want to mess with while being on the sidelines. And then he spent the past 6 years at Ohio State, where he won the inaugural college football playoff, where he was the 4th seed and beat Alabama to move on and win that eventually. He had a brain cyst dating back to Florida, and then this year he was suspended for 5 games due to the domestic violence against Zach Smith, his assistant coach, and this was such a huge story, and I 100% am not an advocate for domestic violence, but let's just say if he had no idea about this, or even if he did, he is not advocating for Zach Smith, nor is he defending him. He said on multiple occasions that he did not advocate for this. He got up on stage. He kind of beat around the bush with his questions with the reporters, but he not one time advocated for Coach Smith. So with that, he got suspended on leave without pay for 5 games, the first 5 games of the season, and his interim coach, Ryan Day, took over, and they won all 5 games during that span. So, and Ryan is an unbelievable coach. He did his job. He fulfilled his duties, and he stepped back. But ultimately, this is surrounding Urban Meyer. Urban decided and announced that he will retire at the end of the season again. and he will be playing in his first Rose Bowl ever, so that will be good for Urban Meyer. And his legacy is at question. Is he done coaching? I think so. Absolutely. With these health problems, this is not something that you want to mess around with. Is he done being around football? Probably not. I wouldn't think so. He's the type of guy that's all he's ever known. Ohio State was the pinnacle for him as far as coaching college football. He's from Ohio. He grew up in Ohio. He was a GA at Ohio State. It's something that he's always wanted to do, is coach at Ohio State. So that's the pinnacle for him. And is his legacy tarnished because of this domestic violence? I don't think it should be. And the reason I say that is because, now, if Urban was the one doing the domestic violence, absolutely. But he's not. It was one of his coaches, and that's something that's out of his hands. May he have handled it not the best way possible? There's a good chance of that, yes, absolutely. But it was not him who did it, nor did he advocate for Coach Smith. So I do not think that his legacy should be tarnished. He is one of the greatest college football coaches of all time, for sure. And that's something that he will go down with. I could definitely see him hanging around, being an analyst, something of that nature. But he's too football savvy, college football savvy, to want to just get up and walk away after all that he's put the time into. The next coaching change that we're going to discuss is Mack Brown. Mack Brown was a very prestigious coach, a 2018 College Football Hall of Fame inductee, and he's been spending his last few years behind a desk being an analyst on ESPN and other sports networks. Coach Brown was 244 and 122 with one tie is his overall record in college football. He's 13-8 in bowl games and 1-1 in the BCS National Championship. He won one with Texas against USC in that beautiful Rose Bowl game that I still remember, and he lost to Florida and Urban Meyer, coincidentally enough. So he's 1-1 in national championship games. Coach Brown got his first head coaching job right here in North Carolina at Appalachian State University. He then went to Tulane for 2 years and back to the state of Carolina for 9 seasons where he was at UNC. He has 69 wins at UNC, the second most in school history. And then he went to Texas, spent 15 seasons at Texas, and was super successful there, coaching a couple of Heisman Trophy winners, as well as that BCS National Championship. He returns back to UNC after leaving them kind of hanging. I remember hearing people talking about how, he left Carolina hanging out to dry, blah, blah, blah. But let's be honest, Texas was a pay grade. It was a promotion per se, even though it's a head coaching job. It's still a promotion. So you can't blame that. Any of us would do that if we got that opportunity. But he did say that he had one more run in him, and he did want to return home to North Carolina. He's taken over a UNC team that's 5-18 their last 2 years and hasn't made a bowl game since 2016. Coach Larry Fedora was at the helm the last few seasons and just could not get it done. So that's something that Coach Brown's trying to turn the tide, per se, and try to get UNC back to bowl eligible. And if I'm a recruit and Mack Brown comes into my living room, you best believe I'm signing that national letter of intent tomorrow. So that's something that is really going to be big for the Tar Heels, and that's something that Mack Brown definitely has an edge over anyone else. The next one, Les Miles. Les Miles is a name that's kind of been quiet the last couple seasons. He's taken a little bit of time off after being fired from LSU. Why he got fired from LSU, I personally am not sure. He was very prestigious at LSU, took over after Nick Saban left. So I'm not really sure why they decided to let him go. He has a 142-55 overall record. He's 8-6 in bowl games and does have a national championship under his belt. He beat Ohio State and then eventually lost to Alabama after Alabama got redemption on him after they throttled him in the SEC championship game. Alabama got revenge, so he's 1-1 in the national championship. Les Miles spent his first 3 seasons coaching as a head coach at Oklahoma State, and then the next 11 at LSU. And he was been quiet the last couple of seasons. Nobody really knew where he was going to go. He was just sitting there, and he wanted the best offer to come, preferably a Power 5 conference, which is definitely where Les deserves to be. And Kansas popped up, and I'm sitting there watching that, and I'm like, Kansas. I don't think Kansas who's Kansas? Now, not necessarily Kansas. Everybody knows who Kansas basketball is, but Kansas football, and I'm sitting there thinking, Kansas. So, but it's a great hire for Kansas, and Les Miles will definitely bring attention to the University of Kansas. And I will say this, too, as a fun fact. Kansas is the first college to have a national championship winner at the helm of their football program and their basketball program, being in Bill Self over there on the hardwoods. Les Miles has taken over a Kansas team that hasn't been ranked in 4 years, and they haven't made a bowl game in 10. So that's definitely something that they're trying to do, is at least make a bowl game, get that 6-win mark, and win a bowl game there. Les brings a lot of knowledge, a lot of prestige to the University of Kansas. Like I said, it is a Power 5 conference, so that's definitely something that he's going to want to be a part of there, just to try to build a dynasty again, as I feel like he kind of got overlooked at LSU after he lost a couple games in a season. You get in that SEC conference, and if you lose 2 games, they're about to put you on the hot seat. So it's something that if you're not winning a national championship, you're getting looked at as you're not getting your job done. And that's the glory of the Power 5 conferences, is they're super tough and super competitive, and that's why they are the best of the best. And another notable head coaching change, Mike Oxley, the offensive coordinator from the University of Alabama, is headed to Maryland. Oxley, of course, another one of Nick Saban's men that move on to be a head coach. And a little fun fact about that, we'll see if Oxley can become the first coach to beat Nick Saban. Saban has never lost to one of his former assistants, which is something that is unprecedented, and it's something that almost happened last weekend in the SEC championship, but it did not happen, as Kirby Smart and the boys couldn't get it done. Still not sure why they did a fake punt on 4th and 11 at the 50. I don't know that, but whatever. I'm not the one calling the plays. So a little bit about Loxley's a former assistant to, of course, Saban, the offensive coordinator this past year. He's also a former assistant at Maryland, so he's returning to try to get the job done there. And Maryland's coming off of a hard past couple of years. They're trying to move on from the passing of Jordan McNair, the football player who passed away during the football activities there. Maryland, they have not had a conference title since 2001. That's back when they were in the ACC. They're now in the Big Ten. They've been in the Big Ten for the last couple of seasons, and they have not been able to get it done. So Mack Oxley trying to be another one of Saban's assistants to turn a program around. And if there's anybody that they can learn from that's one of the best to ever do it, it's definitely Nick Saban. Just another notable here that we're going to be talking about on Friday is App State's former coach, Scott Satterfield. We will be discussing him Friday. He's taken over the Louisville job. He will be on our local/review podcast on Friday. Just a couple other notes. That's going to pretty much wrap up this NCAA segment for our inaugural NCAA podcast here. We discussed the Heisman winner, the college football playoff controversy, and the coaching changes. And with that, a lot of intertwining here. Kyler Murray, Heisman winner, facing off another finalist in the first round of the college football playoff. Urban Meyer being left out of the college football playoff. If they had 8 teams, would he be in? Who knows? But with that, Mack Brown returning, unbelievable career for Mack Brown, and we'll see if he can get the Tar Heel State back up and winning again. Les Miles returning back to the gridiron. Great to see that. Huge Les Miles fan. I think he does things the right way. And, of course, Michael Oxley going to Maryland, going back to one of his former schools. So we'll see if he can get it done there. In closing, I want you guys to please be sure to tune in Wednesday as well for the professional segment. We're going to have a special guest on for Wednesday's segment as well. Still getting the details worked out with that. You'll be glad to hear about this. Be sure to follow our social medias. You can find that on our website at www.allexclusivesports1534.com. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube. It's free. All you need is a Gmail account. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And you can always follow these podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, Buzzsprout, and Podomatic. And remember, on that donations page, 25% of every donation goes to Make-A-Wish Foundation. So we'd be more than glad to have you guys donate whatever you're able to. If any at all, it would be much appreciative. Thank you guys so much for joining me on AES 1534. Remember, my name is Mason Biddix, and I'm your host. Thank you guys for joining. God bless.